Hi, this video will answer whether these two things are the same. That's an obvious question I had when I heard about these two things, and I will also explain what these two things are. There is the concept of Chomsky's universal grammar, and then there is the language that Hans Freudenthal created to talk with aliens, which is Lingua Cosmica, and cosmos means the universe. So there is a language that is created that is supposed to be used to talk with aliens, so that sounds like it's universal language. And then you have Chomsky, where you hear something like universal grammar. So does that mean that these theories, these two things are the same, that there is indeed a grammar that is universal across all the planets and the uh, galaxies, etc., that could be understood by people with intelligence? And is that what the Lingua Cosmica is about? Or the Yes, Lingua Cosmica. I'm actually reading the whole book on Lingua Cosmica. I mean, by Freudenthal. It's very interesting. The guy was a mathematician, but he wrote about linguistics, and he discusses this interesting blend of mathematicians and linguists and logicians like Bertrand Russell and Henri Henri Poincaré. Henry Poincaré, as we would say, Henri Poincaré, and himself, Hans Freudenthal. And there is very interesting discussion there, and I will make a series of videos about it once I'm done reading it. Okay, coming back to what these two things are, Chomsky's universal grammar. So if you don't know who Noam Chomsky is, well, it's not like the photograph is going to help. Noam Chomsky is a linguist. It's a American linguist, US American linguist, and he pioneered this. I'm not sure if he pioneered it, but it is accredited this is credited to him, the theory of universal grammar. There, at the time, there were two prevailing theories of language acquisition. One was behaviorism, and the other one was universal grammar. And the behaviorist theory said that a child understands and acquires language through almost like a machine learning algorithm would, through trial and error. Like the child is hungry, and then it keeps saying, well, initially when the child is hungry, it just cries. But once the child is a little bit older, and then it wants something, then it will try to pronounce it. If you pronounce the wrong word, you won't get that thing. You won't get the milk or whatever. And when you come close to it, maybe once you say papa or mama or baba or I, then you get a lot of positive feedback from your parents, and that's how you start learning. Okay, this is a word that there is some meaning to that word. It's not black, like how babies talk, and they know that black is different than baba, and this word does exist. And then they start trial and error again, milk or doodh or whatever, and then they get that. And that was one of the very strong theories back then. But over time, Chomsky's theory prevailed, which the reasoning is that with Chomsky's theory is that there is something very innate, something biological inside us that allows the language to be possible. For example, children, when they don't, like, if you're learning a language, then you would only learn the language that you have learned. But children, very young children, have shown the ability to create new sentences and new forms, new semantics from the words that they knew. So that means that the machinery in their mind already existed. And okay, this is not my field, so I would suggest you that there is a video called Language in Professor Sapolsky's lectures on behavioral biology towards the end, and you should watch that. So Chomsky came in and he proposed that there is something universal in, well, all the languages across the world have there is quite a similar structure in their grammar, and that has to do with probably something innate that is to us humans. And this is further supported by the fact that despite all their efforts, the scientists were unable to teach chimpanzees and gorillas language. Well, first they tried to teach them vocalized language, which they realized is not possible. They can't make the same vocal sounds as we can. But with, let us say, the sign language, and there were quite a lot of successes with that. That the apes could communicate with the sign language, but they were limited. They could not go beyond a limit. Now, I'm not saying that I mean, they're, well, just inferior. There are things that apes can do with their mind that we cannot. So our language is, we have constructed or evolved or uh, acquired so that it works for our brains. Now that would set an alarm for you. Then how would a universal like lingua cosmica even work, because it's supposed to be be used with in communication with aliens. So, and that's a very important question, because there is a lot of scientists like SETI, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, who are trying to look for aliens. And they sent this Arecibo message a while, I mean, quite a while ago, and then they are all people always sending out messages, which some people consider irresponsible. But what happens when you actually make contact? And that is not discussed as much. Now, of course, there is research on Linkos or Lingua Cosmica, and there is research on newer versions of this language. But I'm not sure if that is as much as, well, I'm not an expert in the field, so I wouldn't comment. Anyway, coming back to whether lingua, then how would it work if even the human language, I mean, we cannot teach it to apes, chimpanzees who are 98%, we share 98% of our DNA with them, check that number, but it is 98 as I remember it. So how would we hope to teach it to aliens? Who, I mean, how would we even begin? The language, it starts with sending out radio signals, and it starts with teaching numbers with beeps, and then logical relations, teaches symbols, and um, well, like this is greater than that, and what is the idea of equality, and sets, and so on and so on, and it builds up to an actual usable language that even humans can use with each other. And then he ended that part one, and he unfortunately never got to part two. It should have been very interesting. um, then yeah, the question, the answer is that Freudenthal, he only intended the language to be understood by human-like species. Like, he writes it very explicitly that this is for human-like species. This is probably not going to work on species that are too different from the humans. Then what's the point of even making this language, right? Because we have on Earth uh, human-like, I mean, 98% is quite human-like chimpanzees who cannot understand our language, let alone the mathematics. Then how can we even hope to understand, talk to people who are definitely not human-like? Now, one hope is that if they can construct the radio antennas, and because acquiring the radio signal, processing it, and creating the antenna would require the same amount of mathematics and so on, which we use. Now, they might not be using the same formalism, so same symbols, etc. Now, he discusses a lot of these things, like whether math is innately present, or is it something conventional. There is quite a lot of there are proponents of the theory that mathematics, physics, everything is just a matter of convention, and sine, or I mean sinusoidal functions, or even the numbers 1 2 3 4, they are just how we are made for our convenience, and they don't really exist in that form. But he doesn't agree with it. He says that no, there are the mathematical things, they exist on their own, and we have formalism, the aliens might have different formalism. But again, if we cannot communicate with then how are we going to communicate with and the answer is, it's not really, I mean, the one thing is that it's a mathematical and linguistic challenge to create such a language, and it's an important piece of being human to be able to create such a language which is very precise and create intended to as communication between someone who has absolutely no idea about what humanity is, what we are as humans. And then, because then you would have to start by defining everything, and you would have to think on a very deeper syntactical and semantical level about what language is. And he goes into very interesting discussions about Plato. I keep saying Plato. Plato and the theory of forms and ideas, and what they came up about. So it's a very interesting field of study in and of itself. Maybe what if in the future we go extinct? I mean, day by day, it's seeming like it's not maybe, but it's like possibly now. And there are humans in the distant future, like 10,000 years later, who cannot read any of our scripts. Of course, they might be advanced enough to decipher it, but what if they can't? And maybe they can understand this language, the humans on Earth. So it's like talking to somewhat aliens, but human-like people, or maybe someone who outside would understand. But the answer to the question is, well, sort of, but I mean, it's the universal grammar of Chomsky is not the same as, like, it does not say that there is like a grammar that any alien would understand, and that's the grammar here. Freudenthal says that this is for human like species only, but let's hope. I mean, he doesn't say let's hope. I'm saying let's hope. I just finished the first couple of chapters. First chapter. It was quite difficult. Took me a while. I mean, the uh, is anyone watching? As always. Now, if you're watching, I think I made it interesting. So I would say that 20% of the people who opened this video would be watching by now. Usually it's like 8% by the end of the video.